Ever get that feeling like those teenage years, all that awkwardness and those intense friendships? What if it wasn't just hormones? What if there was something a little bit darker going on? Something, well, demonic.
It's interesting, isn't it, how Grady Hendrix's novel, My Best Friend's Exorcism, kind of taps into that. And that's what we're diving into today. We're using a discussion by the Morbid podcast, their Weedo book club. They had some interesting things to say about this.
Yeah, and I thought it'd be perfect for our deep dive because I feel like those podcast hosts, they just get it.
Yeah.
They love horror, but they also love dissecting those relationships, those complicated female friendships, the kind we all remember from high school.
Yeah, they bring a really interesting perspective to it. They're not afraid to really get into the feelings, at the heart of it all. And they've got these personal stories, too, that they bring in. It makes it feel, relatable.
Yeah, for sure. So the book, it takes us back to the 80s, 1980s Charleston, and we meet these best friends, Abby and Gretchen. And at first it's all, typical high school stuff.
Yeah.
But then things start to get really creepy with Gretchen.
Right, and what's so clever is how Hendrix does it, He doesn't just hit you over the head with it. Gretchen's possession, it starts small. It makes you wonder, is this really happening?
Yeah, at first you're like, oh, maybe she's just being a teenager, pushing boundaries, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know if you remember that part with the tapeworm.
Oh, yeah.
That's when it's like, okay, this is not normal teenage rebellion anymore.
Oh, man. Hendrix, the way he writes those scenes, it's like body horror,
Yeah.
It just gets under your skin, makes you feel like something's really wrong. The podcast hosts, I swear, they were squirming. You could practically hear them squirming.
It's funny, right, how those descriptions, they get to you differently depending on, I don't know, who you are.
Sure.
Like if you've ever had a run-in with a creepy crawly or something,
Mm-hmm.
those seeds probably hit a little different.
Totally, totally. But you know what else I was thinking about? Their friend group. Abby and Gretchen, but also Glee and Margaret. It's like so classic high school.
Oh, totally. You got your loyal best friend, and then there's the popular one, and the quirky one.
Yeah.
And of course the one who's like, a little too judgy.
Yeah, yeah. And the podcast hosts, they really got into their personalities, and it got me thinking, do we all kind of fall into these roles in our own friend groups? I mean, even as adults, they had this whole debate about Margaret. Is she really just a mean girl? Or is there more to her?
Right, right.
It made me think about, how we judge people, especially back then in high school. Everything felt so, black and white.
It's like there's always more to the story, right? Hendrix, he doesn't make it easy. He doesn't just label his characters as good or bad.
Exactly. He gives you enough to think about why they do what they do. You realize even those mean girl things, maybe they come from somewhere else, like insecurity or just, I don't know, what society expects.
Okay, so back to Gretchen.
Yeah.
When did this possession thing, when did it really start? The podcast hosts, they had all these theories, like maybe it was in the woods after they take LSD. But then there's also that thing at Bible camp,
The way Hendrix keeps you guessing, it's brilliant, isn't it? Makes you question everything. Was it the drugs? A weak moment when the demon got in? Or was it something else? Something, I don't know, darker earlier on?
Well, remember how Gretchen, she talks about talking to Andy even before the woods?
Oh, right, right.
And later we find out about the demon Andrus?
Yeah.
It felt like Hendrix was dropping a clue, hey, pay attention, connect the dots.
It's like he's playing a game with you, wants you to be a detective. And those little details, they're the creepiest, Because you start to wonder, did Gretchen even know? Was there a part of her that knew about the demon the whole time?
And then there's that scene, the one where Abby calls. She thinks she's calling Andy's number, but Gretchen answers, well, I guess it sounds more like, I don't know, some echo of her soul. Stuck in the phone lines. I mean, talk about creepy.
Oh, totally. That's when it goes from, just teenage stuff to something truly supernatural. It's like the lines are blurring, between reality and this demonic world.
Yeah, it makes you think. If her soul's trapped like that, how much control does Gretchen even have over what she's doing? Is it all Andrus?
It's a huge question, isn't it? About free will. If some demonic thing is messing with your body, your thoughts, are you really responsible? Hendrix doesn't give you any easy answers. And that's what I like about it. It makes you think about evil, and about how fragile, who we are, our identity, how fragile that can be.
Yeah, it's deep. It's like he's asking, what if the things that scare us the most aren't these, monsters out there, but the darkness that might be inside any of us?
Oh, that's chilling. But it's also important to remember We all have that potential for good and for evil. It's all about choices, the choices we make. And I guess the things that influence those choices, the stuff from inside us and outside us, all of it. So, we were talking about that scene where it seems like Gretchen's soul is trapped. And it really gets you thinking about free will, doesn't it? I mean, if a demon's calling the shots, are we really making our own choices?
That's the big question, right? Like, are we really in control?
Yeah, it's something people have been debating forever, theologians, philosophers, everyone. And Hendrix, he puts it right there in the story. We see Gretchen doing all these messed up things, but is it her? Or is it this demon, pulling her strings?
Right, right. And speaking of manipulation, didn't you say there was a twist about when the possession might have actually started?
Oh, yeah, the podcast hosts, they pointed out some stuff, some clues that maybe Gretchen and Andras, their connection goes back further, even before the woods. Remember that symbol, the one for the phone company?
Mm-hmm.
Gretchen sees it in the woods, and it's all, like, buzzing and giving off bad vibes.
Yeah, it's super creepy.
Well, they noticed that Gretchen, she says she hears that same buzzing sound when she calls Andy, on the phone. It's a little detail, but it makes you think.
Wait, are they saying Andy was Andras the whole time? Even before the woods?
It kind of changes things, right? If the demon was already influencing her during those calls, then the possession, it wasn't like this one-time thing. It was more like this slow, I don't know, takeover.
It makes you wonder about everything that happened before. Like, did Gretchen even know what was going on, or was she just being pulled in by the demon without realizing it?
That's what I love about Hendrix. He drops these hints that make you question everything. Like he's saying, hey, reader, put on your detective hat, figure this out. And those little details, man, they're so unsettling. Makes you wonder, like, how deep does this go?
It's like those horror movies,
Yeah.
When you suddenly realize the bad guy's been there the whole time, just waiting to pounce.
Exactly. And speaking of facing down evil, the podcast hosts, they had a lot to say about the Lemon Brothers, those bodybuilding exorcists.
Oh, yeah, the god meatheads. They were hilarious. I love how Hendrix brings them in.
He's so good at mixing humor and horror. You've got these guys, these over-the-top characters, spouting Bible verses and pumping iron. But there's also this genuine side to them. Like, they really believe in what they're doing. It makes them kind of endearing,
Yeah, I get it. It's like he's poking fun at, I don't know, some religious stereotypes.
Yeah.
But also, he's acknowledging the power of faith, even when it looks a little weird.
Right. But their methods, even though they're funny, they bring up some tough questions. The podcast host, they talked about how exorcisms, they could be harmful, especially when it's a teenage girl. Someone so vulnerable.
Yeah, there's a line, isn't there, between believing in something strongly and taking it too far. And when you're dealing with, like, a demon, where do you draw that line?
It's something Hendrix doesn't shy away from. There's that scene, with the holy water. The Lemon Brothers are pushing Gretchen to her limit, physically and emotionally. And it makes you think, like, is this right?
Yeah, how far would you go to save someone you love, even if it meant hurting them? And how do you know if you're actually helping or just making things worse?
Heavy stuff. It adds another layer to the story, We want the Lemon Brothers to succeed, but we also wonder about what they're doing and what might happen because of it.
It's like those real-life stories, right? When people do extreme things because of their religion or their beliefs. Hendrix doesn't tell you what to think, but he definitely gives you a lot to consider.
Totally. And speaking of things to consider, the podcast hosts, they spent a good chunk of time on the ending. Bittersweet, right?
Yeah. Even though Gretchen's free from Andras, it's like the experience changes her. And her friendship with Abby is not the same anymore. It makes you wonder, can you ever really go back to normal after something like that?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? The one that stays with you. Hendrix doesn't wrap everything up neatly. He shows you that trauma. It leaves scars on the inside and the outside.
The podcast hosts, they were really interested in whether Abby and Gretchen, if their friendship could survive, like they were invested, hoping those two could find a way to heal and move on together.
It says something about female friendships, how even with betrayal and demons and all that, there's still this love and loyalty. It doesn't go away.
Right. It's like that saying, a true friend knows all your crap and loves you anyway. Abby never gives up on Gretchen, even when everyone else does.
And that love, that's what helps Gretchen start to heal. It reminds us that even when we feel lost and broken, the people who care about us, they can be the thing that pulls us back.
It's like that part when Abby brings Gretchen a care package after everything. It's small, but it's like this huge symbol of how strong their bond is, that kind of friendship, I don't know, that everyone wants.
Right. And it goes back to one of the big themes in the book, human connection, Feeling like you belong, like someone gets you. That can be the thing that helps you fight the darkness. The stuff inside you and the stuff out there, all of it.
Right, so we're back. Wrapping things up with my best friend's exorcism. You were talking about deeper meanings, right? Like more than just the demon stuff.
Oh yeah, my best friend's exorcism. It's not just scary, you know. It's got all this symbolism and metaphor. Like Hendrix is using the supernatural stuff to talk about real things, like being a teenager, friendship, all that.
It's almost like he's saying the scariest things aren't always, monsters or whatever, but the stuff we deal with inside ourselves.
Yeah.
And in our relationships.
Right. Like think about where it takes place. 1980s Charleston. Hendrix makes it this place that looks all nice and pretty, but underneath it's like rotting. There's all this hidden darkness.
Yeah, kind of like those old Charleston houses.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They talk about how they're literally falling apart on the inside, but they try to keep up this front, like everything's fine.
Exactly. It's like a metaphor, you know, for what the characters are going through, especially the girls. They're dealing with all this pressure to be perfect, to fit in, and then they have all these crazy teenage emotions on top of that.
And all that pressure, like to be a certain way, it was the 80s, right? So much pressure on young women back then. I feel like Gretchen's possession, it's almost like it represents that. Like Hendrix is showing how that stuff, it can really mess you up, make you lose yourself.
It's like literally being taken over by something, like you're not in control anymore. The podcast hosts, they talked about different ways to look at demonic possession. Some people think it represents mental illness.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like how it can twist your thinking, make you act in ways you wouldn't normally. You feel like a stranger to yourself.
Yeah.
Others thought it was more about addiction, how it takes over your life, ruins everything.
It's cool that the book can mean different things to different people. Makes you think about your own demons, those challenges we all face.
And they come in all shapes and sizes. Some people, they might see Andres as like the dark side of human nature, the part of us that can be cruel and manipulative.
Yeah.
Others, they might think he stands for the stuff outside us that tries to control us, mess us up. Like society, bad relationships, even our own negative thoughts.
So, like, Hendrix is giving us this way to talk about these things that are hard to talk about.
Yeah.
Using the supernatural as a way in,
Totally. But don't forget about friendship. Abby, she's always there for Gretchen, even when everyone else gives up on her. Yeah. It shows you how powerful that connection can be.
Yeah, their friendship, it's like the core of the book. The heart of it. It shows you that even when you're going through hell, having someone who believes in you, it makes all the difference.
The podcast hosts, they really felt that. They talked about their own friendships, the people who were there for them no matter what, and how those friendships help them get through tough times.
It reminds you that you don't have to face your demons alone.
And sometimes the best weapon against those demons, it's not some religious thing or whatever, it's just being there for someone, listening to them, letting them know they're loved and they matter.
So we've talked a lot about my best friend's exorcism. What's the takeaway? What do we learn from Abby and Gretchen?
I think Hendrix is saying that even when things are really bad, people are strong. We can get through trauma, face our fears, and we can find strength in places we don't expect.
And he shows us how important human connection is. Friendship, love, that stuff can help us heal, give us hope, even in the darkest times.
And maybe, just maybe, he wants us to look deeper. To realize that even stories that seem light or familiar, they can have hidden meanings, important truths.
It's like he's saying, be more curious, more understanding. Be open to how complicated life can be.
Yeah, and remember, even when it seems like all hope is lost, there's always a little bit of light, some good in there, just waiting to be found.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for being here for this deep dive into my best friend's exorcism. It's been fun, creepy, and we've had a lot to think about.
It has. And for everyone listening, one last thought. If this story reminds us that we can defeat even demons, what demons are you fighting? Who are your Abbies, those friends who help you through the hard stuff?
Don't forget, you don't have to go through it alone. Talk to people, connect with them. You'll find strength in each other.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep believing in the good, that it can beat the bad, in ourselves and in the world.